News every day, 6 a.m., 12 noon, and 6 p.m. Listen to Vision News for the most authoritative news. Vision FM 92.1, your most authoritative source for news.
And that is confirmed.
From our studios to the world,
this is 92.1 Vision News. The time is 6 o'clock, and this is Vision 92.1 FM here in Abuja. Well, good morning, and welcome to Vision News. This morning, my name is Andy Chindaba. Today is Monday, 28th October 2024, equivalent to 25th Rabi al-Akhar, 1446 in the Islamic calendar. First, the highlights. Nigeria seeks urgent action on climate change at CHOGM 2024. Northern senators urge federal government to restore power in Kano, Kaduna and others. FCT administration blames scavenger for Abuja building collapse. And internationally, you will hear the medics say Israeli strikes killed dozens in North Gaza as ceasefire talks resume. And in the world of sports, National Sports Commission Chairman calls for support to transform sports in Nigeria. The details of these stories and many more, do stay with us. Once again, good morning. The federal government has called for urgent and aggressive measures to combat the catastrophic impact of climate change in Nigeria. Minister of Environment Balarabe Lawal made the call at the just concluded Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit, CHOGM, held in Apia, Samoa. A statement issued by Stanley Nkwocha, Senior Special Assistant to the President of Media and Communications, Office of the Vice President, said Lowell stressed that the impact of climate change was a global crisis that demanded immediate action. The minister led the Nigerian delegation to the meeting after technical flight issues prevented Vice President Kashim Shettima from representing President Bola Tinubu at the summit. Lowell also restated Nigeria's support for the preservation of democracy, protection of civil rights across the Commonwealth. He told the world leaders that Nigeria had already experienced its unpalatable share of the devastating impact of climate change through flooding, degraded lands, and rising sea levels. The minister added that Nigeria's position on the environment, democracy, security, and other issues were prompted by current challenges being faced across the world. In a communique issued by the Commonwealth Secretariat at the end of the meeting, the leaders reflected on the gathering being the first CHOGM since the loss of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who served as head of the Commonwealth with extraordinary duty for over 70 years. The meeting also named Antigua and Barbuda as the host of the next CHOGM in 2026. Stakeholders have been told in Abuja to receive the report of an European Union-funded study analyzing the preparedness of cocoa and other value chains to comply with the EU Deforestation Regulation, EUDR. The EUDR, introduced on 29th June 2023, aims to limit the Union market's impact on global deforestation, forest degradation and biodiversity loss, promote deforestation-free supply chains, reduce the EU's contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, and protect human rights and the rights of indigenous peoples. While speaking at the event, Massimo De Luca, head of cooperation EU delegation to Nigeria and ECOWAS, said the EU aims to develop a strategy that both protects the environment and mitigates the effects of climate change. De Luca also said that from water to child labor, companies are required to assess risk associated with their activities and measures to remedy, including compliance with national and international standards. Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, Abubakar Kyari, who was represented by Ajayo Lotto Baba, the Deputy Director, Cocoa, at the Ministry, said that given the importance of the EUDR and the need to ensure due diligence assessments in Nigeria's cocoa sector, he inaugurated the National Task Force on EUDR, made up of all relevant stakeholders in the affected value chains. Kyari said the National Task Force has already begun operations and hope to achieve its objectives as soon as possible. Products covered under the EUDR include cocoa, palm oil, cattle, soy, coffee, timber, rubber, and their derivatives. The House of Representatives Committee on Federal Polytechnics and Higher Technical Education has assured that the dichotomy between degree and higher national diploma, HND, and status and employment in the country will be eliminated. Chairman of the committee, Fuad Laguda, gave the assurance during an interactive oversight engagement with the rectors of Federal Polytechnic Shandam and the Federal Polytechnic Wanmuni at the National Assembly. He added that there are a number of proposed bills to address the various challenges facing polytechnics in the country, which are all aimed to strengthen them to provide the needed professional technical expertise towards the country's quest for development. Laguda informed the rectors that the essence of the meeting is to assess their budget performance and know the challenge facing the institutions and find a way to support them to run smoothly and serve their intended purposes.
I think all these things we've asked, you need to go and put together a proper report. Because this report practically says nothing, apart from the fact that it is even not eligible. We don't have your number of students, we don't have your number of staff, we don't know if you followed the federal character for staff employment. Own up and say that you know your report is inadequate. I would beseech on my members and seek that we grant you the grace to resubmit another report to us that will be more comprehensive and that will be able to speak to all these questions we've been asking you.
In his presentation, the Rector Federal Polytechnic Nyam Shandam, Dr. Mikhaila Zakariou, said they are still struggling to stay afloat since the creation of the Polytechnic in 2021, which he said kicked off without a temporary site but started from a primary school building in the community.
$2 billion, which we built an academic complex. We bought, from that TECO grant, we bought a water tanker, 20,000 liter capacity, because there's no water there. Even if you drill borehole to 300 meters down, you'll not get water. So we renovated an existing primary school that was donated to us by the state government. So all this came from the TECO grant. And thereafter, so many projects came up from the TED fund.
The committee, however, frowned at the fact that the school has only 27 students for 3 years, despite having an academic and non-academic strength of 245. And the Northern Senators Forum has urged the federal government to swiftly restore electricity supply in Kano, Katsina, Jigawa, and other states in the north. The forum specifically asked the federal government to expedite repairs of the Shiroro-Kaduna transmission lines to restore reliable power supply. A communique signed by Chairman of the Northern Senators Forum, Senator Abdulaziz Yaradua, after the meeting and made available to newsmen in Abuja, also asked the government to implement measures to prevent future vandalism of power infrastructure in the north. Some parts of the north are presently experiencing blackout following a fault at the 330 kV DC transmission line. Meanwhile, the 2023 presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, has raised concerns about Nigeria's ongoing struggle with an unreliable power supply and frequent national grid collapses. Atiku also condemned the blackout in the southeast, northwest, and northeast regions of Nigeria, which has persisted for weeks. The Waziri Adama appealed to authorities responsible for addressing the blackout to quickly intervene to restore electricity to the distressed regions. He posted on his official X handle saying his policy document contains the most proactive plan for resolving Nigeria's perennial power outages. Atiku also called for the decentralization of electricity to the states, stressing the need to grant states the power to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity for themselves. In the same vein, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission (NERC) held a public hearing with stakeholders in Abuja to address power system disturbances. This comes after Nigeria experienced several power outages due to incessant grid collapses, including two recent incidents on October 14th and 19th, and another on October 21st, and left the northern part of the country in darkness. Chairman of NERC, Sanusi Garba, stressed that the Commission considered these disturbances as a significant public interest issue.
Hopefully, we'll be able to work very closely with our external parties, TCN, and so on, to make sure not only do we maintain the plants, but also we begin to think of replacing all those assets that you inherited from Niger Dams Authority, whether it's 20 or 30 or 40 years old, so that we don't operate the industry on a very thin thread, waiting for the next instability for a national blackout.
Contributing, Executive Director of TCN's Independent System Operator, Nafisat Ali, emphasized the need for a holistic approach to addressing challenges in the value chain. In another development, Saudi Arabia, through the King Salman Humanitarian Aid and Relief Center, has hosted a donors conference raising over $1.1 billion for displaced persons and refugees in the Sahel and Lake Chad regions. The funding commitment was made possible by the contributions of more than 10 donor countries, agencies, and organizations dedicated to addressing the growing humanitarian needs in the crisis-hit areas. The conference was held in Jeddah in collaboration with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation (OIC) and the United Nations Office for the Coordination of the Humanitarian Affairs (OCHA). The conference, which had the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees (UNHCR) as partner, was to provide urgent humanitarian assistance to people in Nigeria, Niger, Chad, Burkina Faso, and Mali faced with various crises and natural disasters. While addressing the conference, Dr. Abdullah Al-Rabia, the advisor of the Royal Court and Supervisor General of the Center, said the contributions would ensure greater security and resilience for affected populations. Al-Rabia affirmed Saudi Arabia's ongoing commitment through the Center to expanding aid efforts in partnership with international stakeholders and ensuring that those in urgent need get help. OIC Secretary General Hussein Taha, on his part, said the forum provided a platform for dialogue among humanitarian leaders and a foundation for coordinated and sustainable support for those affected by displacement. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for sustained humanitarian support and investment in long-term solutions, with over 30 million people in the Sahel and Lake Chad regions requiring immediate assistance. He also called for an end to hostilities while urging protection of civilians and unhindered access for aid efforts. The Development Center Department of the Federal Capital Territory Administration has dismissed as mere propaganda reports of Saturday night's collapsed building in Sabon-Lugbe area of the territory, which allegedly had over 40 persons trapped in the rubble. Director of the department, Mukhtar Galadima, said in an explanatory note that the building had already been demolished and that scavengers, popularly known as Babambola, had invaded the site in a bid to scavenge iron rods when the remaining part of the demolished structure caved in. Galadima said the building is within the site currently under demolition and that the structure was an uncompleted building which was demolished last Thursday. He confirmed information gathered by the department that the site recorded influx of over 500 scavengers who were pulling down and carting away remains of iron rods. According to him, the activities triggered the remains of a demolished slab to fall on them. You're still listening to the news on Vision 92.1 FM here in Abuja, your community-friendly radio. The news resumes shortly. Stay.
Abuja, now the Vision is here. The only place for the fact checks and authoritative news. As the news breaks, it breaks with us. We are Abuja's #1 radio. Vision 92.1.
Welcome back to the final phase of Vision News this morning. The Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, FCT, Nyesom Wike, says the FCT administration's efforts to develop satellite towns and rural areas of the territory is sacrosanct. Wike gave the assurance during the inauguration of the construction of Asukokon Road from Obafemi Awolowo Way to Olusegun Obasanjo Way in Abuja. The project will also include other adjoining roads within the sector center, Akibu district. He said the series of road projects inaugurated for construction in the Abuja city center this week are expected to be completed in May 2025.
If the funds are not made available, it would not have been possible. So thank Mr. President by backing his words with action. As I was coming in, I told my ADC that on Saturday we must go to Area 1 and see how bad the place is. And I can assure you, we will take action because no part of Abuja in the city should be seen to be looking different from the other parts of the city.
Speaking earlier, Executive Secretary, Federal Capital Development Authority Shehu Ahmed explained that the project, when completed, would open up Jabi, Dakibu, Utako, and Uye districts and increase economic activities within the areas. The Nigerian Meteorological Agency, NIMET, has predicted haziness and sunshine from yesterday to tomorrow across the country. NIMET's weather outlook forecast moderate dust haze in the northern region yesterday with horizontal visibility ranging from 2 to 5 kilometers. The agency anticipated that in the north-central region, sunny skies with patches of clouds are expected in the morning hours. Later in the afternoon and evening hours, thunderstorms with moderate rains are anticipated over parts of the Federal Capital Territory, Kogi, Benue, and Nasarawa states. The agency envisaged thunderstorms with moderate rains over most places later in the day. According to NIMET, moderate dust haze with a horizontal visibility range of 2 to 5 kilometers and localized visibility of less than or equal to 1,000 meters are anticipated during the forecast period in the northern region today. The agency forecasts sunny skies with patches of clouds in the morning hours in the north-central region. Later in the day, thunderstorms are expected over parts of the Federal Capital Territory, Kwara, Benue, and Kogi states. NIMET envisaged moderate dust haze with horizontal visibility ranging from 2 to 5 kilometers tomorrow and localized visibility of less than or equal to 1,000 meters during the forecast period in the northern region. According to the report, sunny skies with patches of clouds are expected throughout the forecast period in the central region. It urged the public to adhere to safety advisories issued by relevant authorities, advising airline operators to get airport-specific weather reports, flight documentation from NIMET for effective planning in their operations. And now look at the foreign scene. Palestinian health officials have said that Israeli military strikes killed at least 45 Palestinians across the Gaza Strip, most of them in the north of the enclave, as efforts to secure a ceasefire in the more than a year-long war resumed in Qatar. The negotiations will seek a short-term ceasefire and the release of some hostages being held by Hamas in exchange for Israel's release of Palestinian prisoners. The talks aim to get Israel and Hamas to agree to a halt in fighting for less than a month, in the hope it would lead to a more permanent ceasefire. There was no immediate comment from Hamas, but a Palestinian official close to the mediation effort expressed optimism that Hamas would listen to the new offers. The United States, Qatar, and Egypt have been leading negotiations to bring an end to the war, which broke out after Hamas fighters stormed into southern Israel on October 7th last year, killing 1,200 people and taking more than 250 hostages by Israeli tallies. Gaza health officials say the death toll from Israel's retaliatory campaign in Gaza is approaching 43,000, the densely populated enclave in ruins. The United Nations said the plight of Palestinian civilians in northern Gaza was unbearable and that the conflict was being waged with little regard for the requirements of international humanitarian law. And now, sports news. Newly appointed National Sports Commission NSC Chairman Shehu Dikko has pledged to establish a robust framework for the transformation of sports in Nigeria. Dikko made the pledge after a closed-door meeting with the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, SGF, George Akume, and the immediate past Minister of Sports Development, John Owan Eno, in Abuja. He called for a united front of all stakeholders to achieving the ambitious goals. Dikko said the meeting was part of early consultations and groundwork aimed at transforming the sports sector in line with international best practices. He stressed the need for all stakeholders to rally behind the NSC so as to achieve the Commission's mandate and elevate Nigerian sports. According to him, the new direction is expected to boost professionalism, create economic opportunities, and enhance sports infrastructure and development across the country. In more news, sporting news, the Libyan Football Federation has filed an appeal against the recent decision by the Confederation of African Football (CAF) to award Nigeria 3 points and 3 goals following a disrupted Africa Cup of Nations qualifier initially scheduled for October 15th in Benina, Libya. The verdict also imposed a $50,000 fine on Libya, citing breaches of CAF regulations in handling the Super Eagles' arrival and conditions. According to reports from Libya, the country has enlisted Tunisian lawyer Ali Abbas to defend its appeal, which challenges the CAF decision as unfair. The Nigeria Football Federation's complaint led to an investigation by CAF's disciplinary committee after the Super Eagles endured a reported 20-hour ordeal involving a diverted flight, a lengthy wait at Labrak Airport, 300 kilometers from the intended destination in Benghazi, and inadequate facilities, including a lack of food and water. Nigeria's contingent was eventually forced to abandon the march and return home. CAF's disciplinary committee, chaired by Usman Kani, ruled in favor of Nigeria, citing violations of Article 31 of the Africa Cup of Nations regulations and Articles 82 and 151 of the CAF disciplinary code. Libya was deemed to have lost the match by forfeit with a 3-0 score awarded to Nigeria. The ruling, if upheld, places Nigeria within reach of qualification for the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations finals in Morocco, while leaving Libya out of contention with only 1 point in Group D. And with that, we end the news at this hour. Please be conscious that keeping Abuja clean is everybody's responsibility. But before we go, let's have another look at the major top stories that made our headlines. You first learned that the federal government has called for urgent and aggressive measures to combat the catastrophic impact of climate change in Nigeria. And the Northern Senators Forum has urged the federal government to swiftly restore electricity supply in Kano, Kaduna, Katsina, Jigawa and other states in the north. And another development, the Development Control Department of the Federal Capital Territory Administration has dismissed as mere propaganda reports of Saturday night's collapsed building in Sabon area of the territory, which allegedly had over 40 persons trapped in the rubble. And from the foreign scene, Palestinian health officials have said that Israeli military strikes killed at least 45 Palestinians across the Gaza Strip, most of them in the north of the enclave, as efforts to secure a ceasefire in the more than a year-long war resumed in Qatar. And finally, in the world of sports, newly appointed National Sports Commission NSC Chairman Shehu Dikko has pledged to establish a robust framework for the transformation of sports in Nigeria. And that's the package for the news at 6 this morning. It's produced by Abdullah Lubere. My name is Andy Chindaba. Thank you all for listening. Good morning once again.